Howdy, friends and neighbors. Travis here with episode 3 of Idiot in a Box. I just got back from APAC in New York, which is the Audiobook Publishers Association conference, and I had an amazing time. It was a fantastic week. I met so many wonderful people in person, and I'm still kind of riding a high. So I thought this week, instead of doing game VO, I would switch gears a little bit and do some audiobook narration from a book I'm currently in prep on, called Blood and Oak by Garrett Bettencourt. The book is a nautical adventure novel, which means pirates and sword fights and tall ships and cannons and all kinds of other cool shit, and I'm loving the hell out of it. Hopefully you'll get a kick out of it too. The excerpt I'm going to do is from an action scene. It's midway through the book. It's set in a mill, soon to be aflame. It involves a slightly over-the-top French pirate named Lafitte, our main character John, and his friends who are either in a state of being rescued or rescuing. Let's get to it. I'm going to try and screw up as little as possible, as always. We'll see how it goes. Deep breath. Zen comes down. That's not in the book. "You're wrong, Lafitte," John was saying. "The world is changing. You won't be able to sell slaves forever." "I doubt it, but either way, I will be alive and well." The movement in the corner came closer. Towards the back of the mill, a figure nimbly dropped from the railing of the catwalk onto one of the horizontal gears spinning 10 feet above the floor. The man timed his landing with a loud clunk of a nearby sprocket. "Willock doesn't have me yet," John replied. "Always the gambler, eh, John? I'm afraid that lucky card isn't coming this time." Fernando Pavia came into view as he ran across the series of interconnected gears. He stopped on the last one, 6 feet behind Lafitte. 2 pistols were tucked into his gold sash. He wore a saber across his back and a long, curved dagger on his hip, his favorite Sikh kirpan. Another dagger hilt poked out of his tall riding boots. He held a piece of slow-burning cord in his right hand, a grenade in his left. Making brief eye contact with John, he looked in the direction of a stack of grain nearby. Lafitte patted his prisoner on the cheek. "Au revoir, mon ami." He turned to walk away. Pavia crouched as the rotating gear brought him around. He lit the fuse. "Don't you find, Pierre," John said, causing Lafitte to pause, "men are always most careless a few feet from their door?" The smuggler frowned. Pavia tossed the grenade. John dove onto the floor. A blinding flash as several sacks of grain ignited, a deafening concussion. Flaming grist filled the air. Renault screamed as he landed on the ground, fire spreading over his jacket. Pavia leaped off the gear and tumbled forward. "How about an easy surrender, eh, amigos?" Lafitte, Samson, and Nichols, recovering from the blast, reached for pistols. Pavia shrugged. "Worth a try." He charged, sabers singing out of its sheath. He drove the blade between Samson's ribs, carried forward a step, and hooked the kirpan into Nichols's neck. Renault slashed at the Basque's stomach with his cutlass, but Pavia turned it aside. Steel struck steel as the two traded blows. Lafitte had his pistol cocked and aimed at Pavia. John, hands still bound, charged headfirst into the pirate's stomach. The 2 men sprawled on the ground. Lafitte's pistol slid away. Lafitte thrust his right knee into John's side. Sitting atop Lafitte, John headbutted the smuggler. A gash ripped open above Lafitte's right eye. White light shot through John's vision with the impact. Before John could land a second blow, he caught sight of Francois running towards him, saber drawn. John rolled beneath Francois's swing just in time. Now on his back, John looked up to see Francois pulling back for the killing thrust. A copper dagger thudded into Francois's right side. He growled in pain and fumbled at the hilt. Melisande, following her throw, charged his flank. She swung the beak of her war club full force into his knee. The leg staved in with a wet snap. The pirate collapsed in a fit of wailing. Melisande piled onto his belly, plucked her dagger free, and reversed the grip. She wore a gleeful smile. "I did promise, didn't I?" Her knife plunged with the speed of a pouncing cat. She opened his belly from ribs to groin. The flesh parted so fast there was no blood. Then it welled up like a spring. "Alumno!" Pavia called as he pressed a boot into Renault's corpse and pulled his saber free. John saw Lafitte reaching for his pistol. Following Pavia's cue, John dashed the few paces between them and turned his bound hands toward the swordmaster. Pavia severed the ropes with a swift stroke. "Move!" Pavia ordered. He, Melisande, and John dove behind a grouping of columns and gear shafts. Lafitte fired. The ball bit the corner of a beam in front of John. "Kill them!" Lafitte shouted to a group of his men who had stormed into the mill. The men hesitated at the door. Fire was spreading through the grist and machinery on the south wall. The air was choked with ash and burning kernels. They held out their hands against the heat. One managed to level a musket toward John. Before he could fire, a hail of shots poured into him. Several of Pavia's Basque mercenaries charged into the mill behind the smugglers, swords drawn. Seeing his men outnumbered and engulfed in a losing melee, Lafitte ran for a ladder onto the second-floor mezzanine.
"Where does he think he's going?"
said Ethan, coming up beside John. Grey Feather crouched beside him. "To a fiery death," said Melisande. John clapped Ethan's arm.
"Glad you could make it, mate."
They exchanged a grin.
"How did you find us?"
Grey Feather asked Pavia.
"We did as Senor Sullivan instructed,"
said Pavia, looking past the column for a clear path to the door.
"We watched Senorita Melisande. When Lafitte's man Nichols followed her, we followed him. Facile."
"You knew?" Melisande punched John's arm. John smiled.
"I knew you'd be you."
That got her beaming. Pavia's men had cleared Lafitte's men out of the way, and the Basque signaled for his companions to make their exit.
"And you didn't tell us?"
Grey Feather demanded as they broke cover.
"I couldn't tip my hand in front of Lafitte, could I?"
John winked.
"Pavia, get them out of here."
John hurtled over debris, shielding his face from the withering heat.
"Where are you going?"
Melisande called.
"Lafitte and I have business,"
John called back. Over his shoulder, he saw Pavia lead a charge into a few pirate stragglers. The mercenary's saber sliced through the first. Grey Feather buried his tomahawk in the chest of a second. Melisande clubbed a third. From a barrel near the spreading fire, John snatched his rapier, ace, and his dagger, spade. The hilts were hot to the touch. He grimaced as he sheathed them in his belt and made for the ladder. Smoke stung John's eyes when he made it onto the catwalk. Soot clogged the air, but he could make out movement in the northeast corner. He crossed over the rows of millstones and gears beneath, then wove his way through the clutter of crates on the mezzanine. He found a ladder thrust through a window, but no sign of anyone. He scanned in every direction. Flames licked up the walls from the first floor. The teeth of gears ground and snapped. Shafts and beams sheared apart. John heard footsteps behind him. Spinning just in time, John deflected Lafitte's thrust. The rail boxed in John's sword arm, so he fell back, dodging Lafitte's slashes. He ducked a swing aimed at his throat, then zagged behind Lafitte. The two enemies faced each other. Lafitte held his sword high and level. John kept ace low, close, and pointed at Lafitte's chest.
"You see, John," Lafitte said, "you'd rather burn here with me than escape with your friends."
"I'm not here to burn, Lafitte. I'm here to deliver one last piece of cargo, in promised condition."
"You forget how our last bout ended."
Lafitte lunged. John's hand smarted as he blocked Lafitte's strikes. Peals of clashing steel joined the crackle of the fire. Lafitte sneered and launched into an ambitious lunge. The smuggler was angry, giving up tells. Sloppy. John let Lafitte take ground. He kept his stance low, concentrated on turning away the precise strikes and staying clear of the wild ones. He watched for another sneer, his opening. Infuriated at the stalemate, Lafitte fell back onto the catwalk. John pursued, forcing him back and back again. Lafitte's upper lip twitched. John saw the sneer and darted back, letting his opponent stumble with failed momentum. With a quick thrust, John opened a hole in Lafitte's shoulder.
"Ah!"
cried Lafitte, backing off.
"It's wasted effort, John. Poor Papa is feeding the buzzards by now, and Maman dead of horse disease."
John relaxed his grip, leveled his rapier. "You're bested, Pierre. Drop the sword." A cloud of grain dust ignited and exploded. The shudder in the catwalk sent both combatants reeling. John felt like he was in a kiln. His white shirt clung to his skin, soaked with sweat. black clouds of soot roiled overhead. He grabbed the rail to right himself. Lafitte looked around as if only now noticing the mill on fire and Church Creek swarming with Basques. He dropped his sword.
I guess you win, John. Savor this moment, because I can promise you the Lafitte brothers have a long memory.
The catwalk shuddered again, then dropped 5 feet as the supporting column gave way. Boards parted under John's boots. He dove for the next supporting beam. The catwalk collapsed underfoot. His fingers barely caught the ledge. Ace clattered on the walkway above. Columns of fire rose from barrels and collapsing machinery nearby. Flames licked up towards his dangling feet. Over his shoulder, he saw Lafitte fleeing along the opposite mezzanine. The fire below crept higher. The soles of his boots heated like coals. John struggled to pull himself up, but he couldn't find purchase. The harder he tried, the more his fingers weakened. He was slipping.
Sully!
Melisande appeared above him on the catwalk.
Melly?
John looked up in astonishment.
Where did you—
What? You thought I'd let you roast like a rabbit on a spit?
Melisande grabbed John's right forearm with both hands. She braced her feet and helped him up. When they were both sitting on the catwalk, panting, she smiled like a gambler gloating after a win.
That's 2 you owe me, old Mick.
Choking on smoke, John scooted back from the ledge.
Lafitte!
Forget the frog.
Melisande tugged John to his feet. He scooped up Ace, and the two ran for the mezzanine. A chunk of the 3rd floor came crashing down the center of the mill. Fire crackled in every pile of crates. No path down, no path to the windows.
Melly, we need a way out.
The way I came. Hurry.
John followed Melisande up a ladder leading to the 3rd floor. His lungs burned. His head swam and his balance faltered. Melisande caught his arm when he tripped over a fallen plank. They staggered through the crumbling mill until they reached a door in the corner. Melisande threw it open, pulled John inside, and slammed it shut. John realized he was inside the small jetty that extended over the creek. The large trap door in the floor looked down onto the docks below, where John and Lafitte had walked only hours ago. A series of pulleys fed a thick rope through the opening, down to the cargo platform. A hook dangled at the bottom of the rope, inches above the dock. Firelight flickered in the inky surface of the creek. The rope was on fire, and a trail of flames was climbing towards them.
Shit!
Melisande jumped onto the rope and quickly sawed through the piece inches below her feet. Just as the fire neared her toes, the burning length fell away. John stared at the coil of cable, now burning on the dock some 50 feet down. Shit! Still wrapped around the rope, Melisande pointed to the cleat mounted on the wall.
Lower me down.
John untied the rope. When he gained a hold over Melisande's weight, he doled out slack. He reached the end after 12 feet. Melisande still hung 2 stories above the platform. He tied off and said, "That's it."
What do you mean, that's it?
The timbers in the jetty groaned, threatening to collapse. John jumped onto the rope and slid down to Melisande's level. He entwined his feet with hers. Her eyes flickered like those of a wolf beyond a campfire.
The creek,
said John. Melisande looked at the water below. She grinned.
I like it. You think it's deep enough?
1.5, 2 fathoms, at least.
Sully?
Well, we're about to find out.
She tightened her grip.
Towards the mill. Go.
They kicked their feet in unison, first towards the building, then back towards the water. Steadily, they built momentum. After several swings, John managed to land a foot against the mill. He kicked off, and the two went hurtling. Then they kicked off again.
Now?
Melly asked.
No.
Another swing got them a foot past the platform.
Now?
She said.
1 more.
A final kick off the wall, and they passed over the water.
Jump!
Cried John. They dropped. John brought his feet together, straightened his legs. The water hit his feet like the canes of his former captors. Cold swallowed his world. He landed in the soft mud of the creek bed. All motion ceased. He drifted in the depths, the heat of the fire driven out. At last, in this place, he could breathe. John breached the surface and gulped in air. He found himself treading water beside Melisande. They stared at the spectacular blaze.
You realize, Melisande, John said, if we're being truthful,
you're a frog.
Melisande pondered a moment.
And you're one lucky Mick.
The pair snickered. The mill's roof fell in, and they snickered a little louder. The walls collapsed next, and their snicker became a chuckle. The silo crumbled to kindling. They looked at each other for a moment, then back at the blaze. They reveled in the cold water, the fresh air, the joy of being alive. They howled with laughter. And there we go. Like I said, it's a fun book. Thanks for watching.